Not that one. Let me switch back over to the screen here. And welcome, everyone, to Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The game tonight, other than Ryan's fedora. Ryan, first of all, let me start off. Before I even introduce Dennis, hold on. Where did we get this eclectic hat from?
This was a hat that was given to me. I did about 6-7 years ago. They just gave me the hat as, it was a prop. So I just took the hat.
All right. So Ryan Neff with me, the co-host here at Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The game. Also tonight joining us, Dennis Bernstein, senior writer for the Fourth Period, also on Sirius XM NHL. And Dennis, I will say, first of all, thank you for coming on the show, but how great is it to work over at Sirius XM?
It's amazing. I never thought, and look, my training was not in media. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting from Rider University, which is from Jersey, and a master's in finance from Fordham. It's great. I can do it because I have a broadcast set up here in Los Angeles. I can do, and I'm actually going to be co-hosting tomorrow the drive time show from 3 to 6 p.m. It's been a godsend. And the studios, if you ever get to Toronto, go to the SiriusXM studios, SiriusXM Canada. They are amazing studios. So it's been a great run for me for the last 5 or 6 years. It's a real privilege to be speaking to the people every week about hockey on SiriusXM.
Wow. I mean, I did hear stories about people, like I went to their studios out in Houston, and it was pretty nice going out there. That was 2 years ago, I guess, coming up now. But I did hear that the one in Toronto, that's like really, really nice. But you guys are very fortunate to work over there. I'm pretty sure it's an awesome experience. So, thanks for at least broadcasting for those who love hockey, because again, not everybody loves it. Some people, it's almost like an acquired taste. Some people really enjoy it. I myself, I love my Flyers for many, many years. I didn't like what had happened within the last 3 to 5 years, because I think there was just no, to me, and Ryan knows this as well, to me, it was just one of those things where there wasn't enough that the Flyers were trying to do to make this team better. And then they add John Tortorella last year, started kind of turning things around, and then you had the change in the front office with Jonesy, with Briere, and it was nice because now you can see the Flyers are actually finally coming back, and they're having life, and it seems like they're having a lot of fun. So I know, even though you're on the West Coast, but with a lot of broadcasters, when it comes to the NHL, you guys hear the bits and pieces of their stories, but in your opinion with the Flyers, have they finally made that turn to get better versus what we've seen, at least, let's say, even from last season?
Well, full disclosure, okay? When I grew up in New Jersey, when I went to school at Rider, I was a Flyers fan. Like, I remember the Cup-winning years in 74 and 75, and Rick Lemkeis and Bernie Parent and Bobby Clark. I will tell you this, the league is better when Philadelphia is a relevant team. Yeah. And what really hurt me, and you guys can speak about this as well, when I tuned in 2 years ago and I saw 6,000 people at Wells Fargo, shouldn't be. Like, you could do it somewhere else in a smaller market, but the league is better when Philly's relevant. And has John Tortorella got him back on track? Absolutely. Did I think it would happen? Yeah, not to the success they're having this year, because they're still in the top 3 in the Metro. But there's more structure, there's more accountability. Guys block shots, and if you don't play for him, you're going to sit on the bench. Like Joel Farabee sat for almost 59 minutes of a game one night. That's what you're going to get from John. He's going to lose his temper sometimes. I covered him in Tampa. Angel, I spent 6 months with him right the year before they won the Cup in 2004, and he was great. He was great to me. So it's great to see. Do I think they have the talent, pound for pound, to compete with the Rangers or the Bruins or even a Carolina who's really not doing well? I don't, but I certainly think that with this coach and the new management team, they're certainly on track back to at least respectability, if not contention.
Well, and we're talking about, the Flyers, obviously. So, obviously they're doing the right things the right way now. So, what do you think they need going forward as far as pieces? Because I know defensively they have lacked probably the last 3, 4, 5 years. So, I think if they can shore up their defense and they can keep their goaltenders healthy, there's no, we'll see where this team goes.
Well, Ron, from the goal out, right, is Carter Hart going to be healthy? Like, if he's healthy, then you got a guy you can depend on. Now, there was rumors about him going to Edmonton earlier in the season. Like, will they hold on to him? I think this is a proving season for Carter Hart. If he can come through and play decent goal, because, again, the team in front of him isn't great, as Angel mentioned, defensively. But, again, you're going to have to add talent, right? Structure's great, blocking shots is great, playing hard is great, but in this league, you got to have talent and you got to have elite talent. Are they there yet? They're not. They're going to probably need another center, right? It's good to see Sean Couturier coming back and he's finally healthy. He's probably a number 2 center on a championship team, and he's a number 1 center in Philadelphia. So they need to add more talent, Ryan. But again, I think there's enough structure and enough belief in this system where, and I saw it in Los Angeles where they brought in Todd McClellan. So I think that's the model if you're a Flyers fan you look at. Like 3 years ago, the Kings were terrible. They were awful. Like couldn't score goals. They weren't really good defensively. They built up their defense. They certainly, had guys like Doughty and Kopitar. But that's the model you got to go after. So I think if they do add more up level talent, that they can compete in the Metro, which is a very tough division. So I still think they're on the right track. They still need to add more talent.
So let's talk about the Kings for a second. Now, obviously, they're having great success this year. Taking a look at the stats, they're outstanding defensively.
Yep.
And I think that's where their strength is. The only real weakness I see looking at the stats, maybe their power play can improve a little bit, but their penalty killing percentage is absolutely outstanding. Other than the Bruins are the tops in the league, but the Kings are second. So do you think that they'll add pieces before the trade deadline?
I think that with respect to the power play, Ryan, what they're missing is a guy who's been injured and out he had back surgery in preseason, was Victor Arvidsson, who's a finisher, who's a playmaker, who when they were 25% execution rate on the power play last season, which was top 10, he was in the lineup, hasn't played there all year. So I think they'll wait and see. He's supposed to come back probably around February, which is about a month before the trade deadline. If he comes back as the old Victor Arvidsson, they don't need to really add anything. So that's it. Defensively, they play a 1-3-1. I know it's in Montreal last week, and all the media was whining about the trapping, and it's boring. I'm like, well, this team led the league in scoring, so I don't really know of a team that leads the league in scoring that's boring. And they have to go back to the Devils of 2000 to say, oh, that's a comparable. I'm like, 25 years ago. It's a different game right now. There's way more skill. So I think they're going to stand pat. They could use a little bit more help on the power play on the right side with the right-hand shooter. But right now, really, you don't fix what's not broken. And this team is, in the top 5 with respect to points percentage. So it's been a really good season so far. But again, it's only 26 games in. Angel,
you want to talk about your Lightning as your backup team?
Yeah, well, listen, down here, Dennis, when I moved down here in 2018, I think I brought the Eagles' winning spirit here because obviously the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't win it the first year as they were eliminated. And one thing Brian does talk about all the time is, and I think for a lot of hockey fans, we all know, like Boston last year, you have the best record in the NHL. It means absolutely nothing when it comes to playoff time. And it's a different beast. It's just like Major League Baseball. You can have the best record in Major League Baseball. Come playoff time, it's like there's a switch. Someone turns off the switch and says, no, here, you guys are eliminated. So first year, obviously, there was elimination. It was kind of tough. And then year 2, they come in and they picked up right where they left off. But this time, obviously, they win the Stanley Cup. They have, which was COVID, of course, kind of condensed. So it went on, I think, until September when they finally won it. And then it was a short turnaround, and they were back again. They went back-to-back cups. This season, it's been rough for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Some guys, because you can't keep everybody around, the luxury tax end up taking a big chunk of it for the guys not being around. But usually from the Tampa Bay Lightning, you have 4-game win streak, you lose 1. 2-game win streak, you may lose 2 every once in a while. This year, it's win, loss, and it's just not a loss. It's they're getting hammered. And I understand the team is going to have to reform, regel, the new key members they end up picking up. And there's a lot of moving parts to it. I also don't think they have their lines set up correctly. And that's something that, your head coach, he knows where the piece got to fit in. On top of that, you also have Vasilevsky, in my opinion, I think shouldn't have come back until January. But he wanted to come back early to kind of save the season early on. But Vasilevsky has not been himself since the Denver game, the Stanley Cup, with Colorado. So I don't know what's going to take for Vasilevsky to get back, to being a big cat that we all known and love him for. But this team has yet to find their footing. Is it partially because, again, you have new members to this team, or as you go to rebuild, and they're only 2 years away disconnected from the Stanley Cup, as you're rebuilding and just putting the right key players into key positions?
Well, I think with respect to Tampa, you have the luxury of patience. right? As long all they care about, like you mentioned, they don't care about winning divisions or banners or setting records. They want to get in the top 8. And imagine if they do find their way over the next 50 some on games, that if you finish first in the East and your reward from the first round is to play Tampa Bay, nobody wants that. So they have, look, John Cooper's going nowhere. You're not firing the coach, right? Now, here's a couple of things. You mentioned the salary cap. One guy who I love, who now is on Nationals, was a casualty of the salary cap, was Ryan McDonough. This team is not good defensively, and one of the reasons is Ryan McDonough can play 22 minutes a night, block shots. He's a leader in the room. It's a little bit of a different team. Remember that great third line that Tampa had when they won championships with Yanni Gordon, Blake Coleman. They couldn't keep them together. Guys went and got free agency, went and got $4 or $5 million a year. It just doesn't happen. The way the league is set up with a hard salary cap, you can't keep teams together. So I think if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, you revel in the fact that you won 2 championships. It may be a while. And now the question is with Stamkos about not getting an extension early in the season. He made some comments about, not really guys, they stepped up for other guys and not for Steven Stamkos, even though he's on the other side of 30. It's an older team, Angel. But again, they have the luxury of time. All they want to do is get to the tournament, and then they'll take their chances.
Yep, that they will. And I think it's going to happen again. I mean, obviously, the only thing I haven't gotten used to, Dennis, down here in Tampa, because when I first started going to the hockey games here, it was one of those things where you would see the away fans load up at Emily Arena a lot more than the Lightning fans. Then obviously it came to turnaround, so you were, sellouts, sellout after sellout. And the Emily Arena, I will say, as much as the Wells is fun back in Philly when I left from there, but the Emily Arena, and for Jeff Finnick, for a guy who just, it's a rental lease for him. For what he's done, the upgrades, for the fan experience, it's really second to none what he's done with the Lightning. But I think it's the same way with Cooper. It's just going to take time. I think a lot of folks down here are patient. I don't expect for them to make any kind of playoff push this season. And to me, I would just, again, in my opinion as a fan, I'm fine with that as long as they know exactly where they need to pick up the pieces to come next year. Now, obviously, they would like to make the playoffs, but I don't think they would pass the first round with the way this team looks now. Now, if I referred them to St. Louis Blues, which you remember just a couple years ago, they were in the basement, crawled out from the basement, ended up winning the Stanley Cup. But it's hard to do in the NHL. But I think for Lightning fans, I'm quite sure they're quite patient.
Well, hey, look, it depends what your optics, right, Angel? Because the team that you just mentioned, the St. Louis Blues, yesterday they fired their coach. So what does it mean, right? When you don't, and it's a different breed, it's a different cat that plays this game now. 23-year-old kids get an 8-year term. Like, you listen to Jordan Cairo. They asked him, he's one of the highest paid players. They asked him about Ruby leaving. He goes, he's not my coach anymore. I don't have a comment. So you know what went down between those two guys, right? So it's success is fleeting. There's not a lot of patience in this league, but the one team that can afford to have patience based on their track record would be the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Dennis, bigger surprise, the fact that Boston is doing so well after last year, or the fact that Edmonton, who I think is a Stanley Cup contender, are struggling right out of the gate?
They were struggling, Ryan.
Well, they were.
Right. I think that's the bigger surprise, right? I mean, Boston was going to be good, even though Bergeron's not there anymore, Krejci's not there anymore. They still play great defense. They're quick to the puck. They have 2 of the best goaltenders in the league. So, look, they weren't going to be a 135-point team. Let's be real. They could regress 30 points, which would be a disaster for most teams, and still have 105 points. Right, I still think there's weakness in the middle because Poitras, the young kid, and Charlie Coyle, that's not a 1-2 combination that's going to beat like the Rangers with, let's say, Zibanejad and a Trocheck. So I think the bigger surprise is the way out of the box Edmonton played. Now, they couldn't get a save, and no matter how great Connor McDavid is, when you can't get a save, you're not going to win games. Number 2, he was hurt. I went to the Heritage Classic in Edmonton. He wanted to play in that game, and he either had an oblique or some rib issues. He wasn't 100%. But now that he's 100%, they won 8 in a row. They're going for 9 tonight against Angels Tampa Bay Lightning. That was the bigger surprise. Nobody saw Tampa. A lot of people picked Tampa at Edmonton to win the Cup. They come out of the box like 250 points percentage team. That was a major, major shock. But you know what? There's something called regression. You regress to the mean, and now Edmonton, when they're scary and when they're really good, they have the benefit of a weaker schedule of playing, but you're beating those teams. You got to play those teams. But that was the biggest surprise. Nobody saw Edmonton coming like that out of the box.
And I have to ask just real quick for Angel's soon-to-be wife, Deb, and my Chicago Blackhawks.
Yes.
I can't even believe I'm asking this question. How long before we see big-time returns on Connor Bedard and what they're trying to build around him?
Well, they're getting big-time returns on the notoriety, right? He's already on national TV. He was on a couple days ago against Connor McDavid, which was great. Right? It's just like Philadelphia. They have to surround him with more talent. And when you look at their top six, that's not a contending team. That's a team that could be in the running again for the first overall pick. Imagine getting Macklin Celebrini, who's the kid at BU, who's going to be another superstar, with Connor Bedard. They just have to get better players. But here's the one thing: if you're a Chicago Blackhawks fan, people want to play in Chicago. They don't want to play in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
They may not want to play in Calgary. They want to play in Chicago with Connor Bedard. So in the free agent, business, they should do well there. But like every team, no matter how good their system is and how many prospects you might have, you have to make trades to win. So the key for them is, can Kyle Davidson make trades and import talent to surround Connor Bedard? You have to have patience. And again, if you're a Blackhawks fan, you got those 3 rings. Like, you can still remember, it's not that long ago that Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews patrolled the ice. Now, I'm sure it's breaking your heart to see Patrick Kane in a Red Wings uniform, but it's going to take time, and it's a question of how much talent can they surround Connor with. But he's the real deal. He's going to score 40 goals this year, which I had him under 30. But when I watched that shot the other night that he scored on against Edmonton, I'm like, okay, this kid is without question as advertised.
Now, there's two comments coming in. Joey B was a great fan of the show. It tunes into everywhere we end up going. But one thing he says is, Dennis, most successful NHL player that came out of New Jersey. Jim Dowd, arguably, also from Brick High School in South Jersey, had a great NHL career. And then also follows it up with, Dennis, thoughts on how USA Hockey is taking the physicality out of the game. Where do you see the NHL in 10 years or so with the way junior hockey coaches are being influenced by USA Hockey? Well,
to answer Joey's first question, I was a season ticket holder when they won the Cup in '95. I lived in North Jersey. So Jimmy Dowd, Jersey's own. So he probably is one of the best, if not. I have to check recently who's back into the system. With respect to physicality, physicality is going out of the game without question because there's so much skill. And here's the thing. 10 years ago, if you were a fourth liner or a third pair defenseman, if you were a marginal skater, you could play in the league. You can't anymore. Like, the last guy on the team has to be a great skater. So that's number one. The physicality. Here's the problem, though. When a good hit is laid out, you have to fight, even though it's a legal hit. Like, I've seen this guy here in L.A., Andreas England, lay out perfect hits, line up guys, and then as soon as that happens, he has to drop the gloves and answer for that perfect hit. So what we want to see, I would like to see more physicality in the game. What we can't see is when the bad hits, the hits from behind, the boarding, like that stuff has to come out of the game. I think there's less respect in this game right now than it was back in the day, 15, 20 years ago. I think that's it. So, yes, it's a less physical game without question. You're not going to get, like you guys all remember, there's no Broad City Billies anymore. Guys don't get $300 million. There's no Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz could not play in this league right now. Yeah. Right? Maybe Hound Dog Kelly could. Maybe Don Selesky could, but the Hammer couldn't. So it's a very, very different game. So if you grew up with the physicality, it's not coming back. So I don't know how you solve that. I like to see more physicality in the game. And you do see it when you get to the playoffs because you have to fight for every inch. But in regular season games, there's just not a lot of checking anymore. Joey's right.
You figured 2 years ago with Denver, when that series, Dennis, it seemed like speed was the number one killer when it came taking down the Tampa Bay Lightning. That was the biggest thing. Last year, it seems kind of like a mix of between speed and obviously the line changes were fast and furious during the NHL finals. I mean, we can see that now. So this year, it's early still in the season, and it's kind of hard to tell because you still have the combination, a little bit of the speed. But I think this year, the puck is being passed a lot more. Also, the guys are having a little more patience at the net. At least that's what I'm gathering, and I could be wrong. What can we expect as we get into the second half of the NHL season, as we turn into January? Are we going to see more still speed skating that will get these teams into the playoffs, or are we still going to see that mixture of what we saw from last year?
Well, here's the thing. The game is very different, and it's probably the sport where it's so different between the regular season and the playoffs. Like NFL, it's basically the same game. And NHL changes. So in the regular season, and you mentioned, look at the last two champions. Colorado had a lot of speed. Like Cale Makar on the back line. Are you kidding me? He's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And last year, so you figured, okay, we need speed and skill. And what did Vegas do last year? Vegas didn't have a 30-goal scorer on their team. Marshall had 29 in the regular season. They had 4 lines, 3 pairs. They rolled guys, and they were big and physical. And remember, the thing that decided the Stanley Cup final was the first game. Keegan Colasar lays out Matthew Tkachuk. He breaks his sternum, and he's done because of a physical play. So you thought, okay, I need speed and skill. Well, maybe I don't. Maybe I need a grinding third and fourth line like Tampa had. So it changes. It's a copycat league, but it's, Angel, to answer your questions, I don't know. Dallas could win. They're not the most physical team. Could Vegas repeat themselves? Absolutely, they could. But I think it's still moving away from the more physical, bigger teams, more towards what you mentioned, the skating and the skill in this league, which is like the kids that come in this league now, guys, they have mad skills. Like there's no way, like would anybody try a Michigan move 15 years ago? Try that move? No. It's just the speed and skill in this game is just is crazy, and that's why the sport is, I think, is better than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's true. Joy B has another comment, as he says, or at least another question. Dennis, do you think McDavid and Edmonton will win or will wind up, up in big markets in U.S. organization, or don't see Oilers winning a cup? He needs to get out of Edmonton like Gretzky to L.A. back in the day.
No, I think they would burn the city down if McDavid left. But if they don't do something serious with respect to the playoffs in the next 2 years, the guy who could leave would be Leon Draisaitl. I think that would be the guy, and his contract's up a year earlier. So I think that pace. Look, they've been there 9 years. It's a long time. You think Connor's this young guy? He's not young anymore, right? He's in his prime. So I think the guy. So I can't envision Connor leaving that organization. I could see if they don't become legitimate Stanley Cup contenders where they're getting to a cup final, or even winning event. Leon Draisaitl could be the guy to walk the free agency.
So just real quick here, and I know Toronto Maple Leafs fans are going to hate me for asking this question, but look, the Blackhawks went, 4 years between Stanley Cups?
Yeah.
We all know how long it's been for Toronto, Dennis.
1967, Ryan. Let's go. I know the date.
Every year we say it. Now, last year they got out of the first round in forever. Yeah. So what's it going to take for this organization and this team to get over the hump and make a Stanley Cup final?
Well, the big players have to play big in big spots. So in the playoff game, when it's a game 6 or game 7, you need Mitchell Marner, William Nylander, and Austin Matthews to score. Number one. Number two, their defense is not a championship defense, Ryan. I'm sorry. They're all banged up. Klingberg's now out for the season. Maybe they make an add or a move. Maybe a guy like Chris Tanev out of Calgary. But their goaltending, the best goaltender was Joseph Wall. He just had a high ankle sprain. He's out for 6 weeks. Here's the thing, and you mentioned Edmonton. I'll rip off something that Craig Button said on SiriusXM. Top-heavy teams don't win championships. Well-balanced teams do. And again, I go back to Vegas, who doesn't have Mark Stone's a great player. Marchessault stood up and got the Conn Smythe last year. But it's the well-balanced team. And I just don't think Toronto's balanced enough. I don't think good enough defensively. And there's question marks in goal. So they look really good. They might get 105, 110 points. They could win the division. Do I think they're a 4-round team? I don't. Again, I'll go back to Angel. If Tampa played Toronto again this season, I know they're all banged up and the goalie's coming back. It'd be a toss-up round, even if they were 15 or 20 points between the two teams. So I just don't think Toronto's built for a Stanley Cup winner. It's great to see. And now what happens with William Nylander? Will he stay there? It's just these top-heavy teams don't win championships.
Yeah, and they're losing 5-0 right now to the Blue Jackets. So
yeah. Joey B says, Dennis, are you going to be at the NHL draft in the Sphere?
I will be at U2 at the Sphere on Saturday. And yes, I will be at the draft. That's going to be amazing. It's be the last time that everybody will be together with respect to the teams being on the floor. That's going to be crazy. I think the NHL awards are going to be in Los Angeles this year. That's the chatter. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the Sphere this weekend. And certainly I can imagine the optics for the NHL draft. They're going to go out and change the format like they do with the NFL and the MLB, where the teams don't show up. At least they're going out on a high note with the Sphere. That should be an amazing event.
It should be, but I kept hearing no. So Debbie and I were out there for the summer league, and that's just when they were putting the final touches on the Sphere. So we got to see the outside. Didn't get a chance to see the inside. The outside itself is a spectacle. I mean, it was big, and obviously for the summer league, they had the big basketballs that would float around, and it was really nice. The only thing that I heard, and I know Joey B went to go see YouTube as well over inside the Sphere. What I heard was, and I wonder if they're planning on changing things, people end up getting sick because I guess so the corners of the Sphere. And because YouTube likes to use a lot of graphics in their shows, and they had the entire landscape, people were getting really dizzy. Some folks ended up passing out because of the vertigo.
Like motion sickness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering I don't think the NHL obviously would do something as big as YouTube, but I'm just wondering when you go this weekend if they'll not change it out so people won't get sick, because Joey said when you were at the outer edges, that's where it seemed to affect the people the most.
Oh, really? Yeah. We're in the middle. I think we're like in 30, like the third level, 307. We're in the middle. So I think we'll be okay. But it's going to be really interesting to see because it's such a. And I had one. Actually, it's funny. I mentioned it on air on SiriusXM, and one of the scouts, I think from Nashville, came up to me. He goes, "Hey, I heard that you mentioned. Did you go to see U2? It was a fantastic show, but he said the pitch and just the steepness of the building is concerned. So the ladies shouldn't be wearing high heels when they go. It's a unique building. Angel, you've never seen a building like this before. So
Right.
I guess there is some issues with respect to just the perception and all the senses around you. It's going to be really, really interesting. And I wouldn't be shocked if people were getting a little bit dizzy or some motion sickness from that spectacular show that they put on.
Yeah. Well, you figure they could put on, like, in a cruise ship, if you ever went for a first time, they have the bracelets. You can end up putting on there. I don't know if it ever worked. I've never gotten sick on a cruise ship. So
I'm going to bring some Dramamine with me to the show tomorrow on Saturday night. So we'll see.
And there you go. But the other thing, too, as Joey talked about as far as the NHL draft, how about the NHL All-Star Game, which I think obviously they changed the skills competition. They tried to make it more enthusiastic for the fans. I kind of like the way it's set up, the new way now versus the way it was done before. I just think there's more on the competition level, which is more interesting to me. But what are your thoughts as far as the actual NHL All-Star Game, at least the skills competition?
Well, look, it's a schmooze fest for the advertisers, right? And that's what you're really doing here. The guys don't care; they go out and have a good time at a party. Hey, look, I know it's Toronto and cold, but last year in South Florida, everybody was at the Elbow Room in Fort Lauderdale and having a great time, right? So the players do have a good time. I like the fact that they bring back the fantasy draft now, but here's the thing, guys: you're not going to see the All-Star Game for at least 3 years because next year they're going to do that 14 tournament. The following year, I assume they're going to play in Milan in the Olympics. So if you don't like the All-Star Game, here's your opportunity to rejoice because you won't see it probably until 2027 at this point in time. I like the format. I always have a good time at the All-Star Game. And the players, they might grouse about it, but when they get there, they're with their mates, they're with their peers, they're with the elite. They have a good time. And the way they set up the events, and Toronto's a fun city. It's going to be crazy because, again, the attention that's paid to hockey, it's in the right city, right? I don't think that players like going. If it's going to be 10 degrees below zero, I think there'll be a lot of grousing. Maybe a couple guys might get ill a couple days before the event. But it should be a lot of fun and a great gathering. But again, it's going to be something. And look, I'm an old cat. I remember when the All-Star Game had some currency, especially in the MLB. You guys remember the AL never played the NL. And so that was a special event in the 70s, 80s. Now it's so blurred right now. So I enjoy the festivities. I get when people don't like the All-Star Game, but it's something that I think still going to be a fixture because there's an opportunity for advertising and just to help and build relationships between the NHL and their partners.
Yep, I agree. It should be. I mean, it should be good. So, Dennis Bernstein, thank you so much for coming on the show here tonight. I'm quite sure we'll have you back on again because, again, it's fast and furious, and it's the way the NHL is. But we appreciate you coming on. Please, once again, let everyone know exactly where they can find you. We know that we can find you on SiriusXM NHL, where you're the host of there, and I'm pretty sure everybody who has it and doesn't have it right now, I think, matter of fact, they're running a special for $5 for the year or something crazy for SiriusXM.
Well, here's the thing, guys. If you can't find me, it's on you. Because I'm everywhere. Right?
Yeah,
so I'm on SiriusXM. I host a show like East Coast time. So I host 11 to 1 Eastern on Saturdays. I'm actually on tomorrow, 3 to 6 Eastern. You can find me at thefourthperiod.com. That's where my columns are. And you can find me on Twitter, Dennis TFP. So again, I'm not hiding from anybody. If you want to engage me, and I engage on social media. So anytime you guys want me on the show, happy to come back and talk more hockey with you.
Thank you, sir.
We appreciate it, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
All right. Have a great night. And then on standby, as we saw him in the green room, as we go from one right straight to the other, Jason Priester. If I'm saying the last name correctly, sir?
You are. You have it. You have nailed it.
All right. Well, thank you. The beat writer and director of recruiting for Clemson, which, again, it's got to be number one. Being a beat writer is tough, Jason, because you guys, not only do you guys do such a professional job, you want to make sure you inform everyone and have the actual facts, where you have now the new school journalists, not taking anything away from them, but everybody's just easy to try and be the first one to break the story without getting the facts. So I will say, for myself and Ryan, 100% great respect for you for actually doing the work and putting the time in to make sure that the articles that we read as fans, that we get the correct story. So we thank you first and foremost for coming onto the show, and thank you for the work that you do.
Much appreciated, man. There's a lot of work that goes into chasing down that information. Nobody ever likes to be wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't, and that's a funny part because again we get it. Listen, everybody's fast, right? This year, in our time when we were growing up, it was a newspaper. You waited for the newspaper, you got the article, and it was what you wrote today was tomorrow's news. What you don't write today, if you're not the first one to jump on it, it's yesterday's news. Because again, everybody wants to get the factual information out there, and it's tough because in college football, I mean, and Major League Baseball everywhere, especially college football, because it moves at such a fast and furious pace. It's got to be tough to keep up with a story, and then something else breaks, and you got to switch from what you're currently writing to find out more actual facts.
Oh, when you cover recruiting, it's brutal, man. Especially since they've instituted this transfer portal and everybody can move around and the NIL stuff. It's just a lot of moving parts, and it never ends. Seems like recruiting's always in season now. It used to be just certain times of the year. And especially now that we're getting towards National Signing Day next week or the early signing period, it is by far the busiest time of the year for me, despite the fact the regular season ended 2 weeks ago.
Jason, let's talk loads of football. There's all kinds of stuff going on. 8-4 regular season, not what Clemson fans are used to, obviously. Dare we say Clemsoning? Remember that term way back in the day under Mr. Bowden? So, what's the status of Will Shipley? Is he going to play in the bowl game? Is Kate Klubnik going to play? You're talking about the transfer portal. I know they play Kentucky in the bowl game. So, what's the status of those players, and what do you see going forward? Is Dabo Swinney going to finally tap into the transfer portal?
Yeah, we actually heard from Will Shipley today. We've kind of been waiting on a decision from regarding his future, whether he's going to play at Clemson next year or enter the draft because he's a junior. Participated in senior day activities, if I'm remembering right, on senior day. So we kind of been waiting on that. Thought we were going to get it today, but we didn't. He's going to announce his decision after the bowl game. He is going to play in the bowl game. He's been practicing. Cade Klubnik was back at practice today. He didn't practice Tuesday because he had finals. Still has that ankle that he's been dealing with, heavily taped up, but he's been dealing with that most of the back half of the season, so that's nothing new. So those guys are fully on board. You got a couple of guys that are not going to play. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has announced his intention to enter the draft. He's not going to play. Same for defensive tackle Luke Roro. Bo Collins is transferred out. And Nate Wiggins is another guy that's headed to the NFL. So there's 4 starters, and Andrew Makuba is another guy that's transferring. There's 5 starters who from the regular season who will not be playing in the bowl game due to opt-outs or moving on to the NFL.
Defensively wise, I think Clemson was ranked 8th in the nation. Offensively, different story. What grade would you give Garrett Riley's offense in its first season? Because I know there's a lot of fans upset that they were expecting him to bring the success he had at TCU over to Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson's offense was hard to watch at times this year. It was very discombobulated. It just did not work, man, most of the time, particularly the passing game. And for me, the biggest disappointment was probably the offensive line. If I had to grade it, I'd probably give it a C minus, D plus, something along those lines. That offensive line just struggled so mightily with what Garrett Riley wants to do on offense. Clemson's always kind of ran a simplified zone blocking scheme, hat on a hat, and Riley likes to run a lot of traps, counters. Guys have to get out and pull, and Clemson's offensive line struggled big time with that this year. They really simplified things over the last 4 games. Kind of went back to more of that zone blocking, and it worked. But I don't think you want to handcuff your offensive coordinator that way and limit what he can call. Clemson goes out and makes a change. They bring in Matt Luke, very successful offensive line coach. He's been away from the game 2 years, but had a lot of success. At Georgia, he was a head coach at Ole Miss for a little while. A lot of experience. He's very good on the recruiting trail, so I think Clemson's upgraded there. But That offense was hard to watch this year, and for me, behind the offensive line, I think Cade Klubnik was a bit of a disappointment too. He's not nearly as far along as I thought he would be at this point. He he still looks like the game's too fast for him at times. He just doesn't look like the same kid I watched so much film of from high school. Man, he just looked, he kind of oozed that it factor in high school, and he's kind of struggled to take that success in high school and translate it to the college level.
Yeah, because everybody thought that DJ was like a big issue, and everybody thought that Clay Klubnik was going to be the answer. And to me, the season's kind of like turned on the Florida State game, to be quite honest with you. I thought if they could have beaten Florida State, it would have propelled them to a fantastic season. But once they lost that game, I know they were 4-4, they won 4 in a row, but I have a feeling if they would have beat Florida State that game, it would have been a much different season.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that, man. That loss, and it's not just that they lost, but the way that they lost, it kind of took some of the wind out of themselves. They went on to lose to Miami and North Carolina State. Just a brutal loss there. You got control of that game. You looked like the better team for most of the day, and you find a way to beat yourself. Blindside sack that results in a scoop and score. A terrible decision by Klubnik on a third down play there. I think it was right before the end of regulation or maybe in overtime, where it's an RPO and everybody in the stadium is 3rd and 1. Everybody's expecting him to hand it off, but he doesn't. He pulls the ball and tries a little wide receiver screen. Nobody's blocking out there, and it gets blown up. It was just one of those excruciating, bone-crushing defeats. And, yeah, I do think it took some of the wind out of themselves.
So Clemson, for the most part, Jason, the big talk of university, unless you're just not a college football fan, Clemson, just like Florida, the Gators, as you see with Ryan and his shirt, the same way with the Seminoles. There's certain teams in the college ranks that you hear all the time. Most of the times, you will watch them on TV. It just seems that the past couple of seasons for Clemson, and everybody goes through it. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not completely bringing down the Clemson Tigers, but you figure Clemson is not where they want to be. And I would assume they're just, again, I know recruiting is the hardest thing to do. How far is Clemson away from being back to not only just being contenders, to being back in a bowl game?
It depends. It depends on how much growth you see from Cade Klubnik. Dabo Swinney still fully believes in that guy. He thinks he's got a good quarterback in him. He just needs to grow up a little bit. If that's the case, I think there's a couple of playmakers away from maybe being back to where they were. They still got the defense. I love the hire of Matt Luke as the offensive line coach. Receivers kind of where they really dropped off from a talent level perspective. They used to be known as wide receiver U. I think they've missed on a bunch of guys in recruiting, guys that, big time recruits that just have not panned out at the collegiate level. And Clemson struggled throwing the ball down the field. I think a lot of that was not having somebody out on the boundary that was a threat to stretch the field consistently, man. I like Bo Collins, but he is what he is. He's just not that guy. I see him as kind of a complimentary number 2 guy. If you're depending on him to be your top dog at wide receiver and you're number 1 out on the boundary, you're probably not going to have a lot of explosives. And Clemson did not have a lot of explosives. On top of that, add in injury to Antonio Williams, who's probably your most productive receiver there in the slot. And it's just been a brutal stretch when it comes to receivers. 3 consecutive years, they've struggled to keep guys healthy. And again, add in all the misses in recruiting. And I'm talking about guys that have even transferred out and moved on to other programs and still aren't producing. So, I'm not sure it's a coaching thing. I think they just had a bunch of misses, and the wide receiver plays kind of falling off a cliff when you compare it to 2016, 2018 teams that won national titles.
Well, and I know it's not where they want to be, obviously, the fan base. The students there have always been, very supportive of the team. And most students are when you're looking at, obviously, different universities. But Clemson is always one. It's always, you just know that every season it's going to come up. Clemson is going to be one of the first of the 2 top teams that are always talked about. So it seems odd not to be able to hear it as much as we've known for it. And everybody knows they have their rivals. So it's different for me to not be in here to hear Clemson's name all season long. So I know it's got to be tough. And also, what it doesn't help either is one of two things. One is that transfer portal, and then the other thing to add to it is the NIL deals, because now we see someone like a Marvin Harrison Jr. that he wants to seek and go not only to the transfer portal, but also looking for that money from the NIL, and he could be withstanding making the same amount of money on his first rookie contract in the NFL. So, when we talk about the portal, and I know the NCAA, they're trying to figure this stuff out, like what makes the most sense. How much is going to be too much? And I have no problem with the students because the universities have made money off of them for many years. But now are we starting to get to that stratosphere of the NIL era where it's going to be, you're talking about $5 million, $10 million. Can we get up to $20 million? How much is too much? And are these athletes ready enough to take on that kind of money when they know they can put that towards the future and make something better out of it?
Yeah, this NIL landscape has gotten crazy, and it's gotten crazy fast. I know somebody, that's kind of plugged in with a collective, and he tells me that kids are starting to ask for insane amounts of money. And, there's a running back in the portal looking for $75,000 a month. A running back, that's quarterback money.
Good
And
Lord.
I don't know how sustainable it is. I think the bubble's going to burst eventually, because this is not money that's coming from the schools. It's having to come from donors. And, when you have to keep calling these same donors once a month, once every other month, keep asking for more and more money, I think you're going to start seeing some donor fatigue. Matter of fact, I know the programs around here are starting to see some donor fatigue. So that's something that's very real. And it's something that I think's kind of hurt Clemson a little bit, because I think Dabo Swinney was a little slow to kind of embrace what we're talking about NIL, but I think he was a little slow to embrace the portal. It's kind of blown up in the same way. Um, I never did answer your question about Dabo tipping into the portal early. I didn't do that. I did that by accident. I do think they're making an effort. With this class, they've targeted a couple of 2-3 offensive linemen. I've been told they want to look at taking a defensive end. The strategy, I'm not quite understanding it. They really struggled recruiting offensive linemen in this 2024 class. They went 0 for 3 on the in-state guys. They went 1 for 6 on the guys they invited to their big official visit weekend over the summer. So that was a 1 for 9 on their top 9 targets, and that's Clemson usually hits at a much higher rate than that. So that's kind of unprecedented. I think that played into Thomas Austin being let go. So I think some of the guys they targeted early here in the portal, I'm not sure are guys that are coming in here and starting at Clemson next year. And portal guys want to go where they know they're going to start. So we've seen them get beat out on one by Georgia Tech for a kid that announced yesterday. They got beat out by Penn State for another one. And again, 2 guys I don't think we're starting at Clemson next year, and I think that's an odd strategy to take. But at the same time, I could see them maybe seeing if they could maybe add some guys they want to still try to develop a little bit, because they return 4 of their 5 starters next year. But maybe some guys they see maybe starting, the year after next, due to all the misses in this current class. They got another portal kid visiting tomorrow, and I've still not heard of a single name at defensive end of anybody they're looking at. But I do think they're going to eventually try to take one, because they're paper thin there when it comes to experience. But all in all, man, this is something that I just don't think is very sustainable. We're talking about insane amounts of money, and it's having to come from the donors, not the schools. I think we're on the verge of seeing a complete break from the NCAA, and it's going to be something more similar to the NFL. We're going to have collective bargaining contracts, all that good stuff, and the NCAA is not going to even be involved in football anymore. Or that's where I think we're in.
Yeah, I said that for years, Jason. Real quick, before we let you go here, Clemson, Big 10, Big 12, or SEC? Because it's going to be a topic of discussion, and it's coming.
Oh, yeah. We've kind of been waiting for some kind of announcement here the last, probably since October. There was talk or some buzz about some kind of announcement coming around here. I'm not sure it was going to be the announcement everybody thought it was going to be. But If you look at everything Clemson's kind of done behind the scenes, man, it screams Big Ten. The schools the sports they've added. They've added a veterinary school. All the stuff they've done to try to improve their academic standing. It just screams Big Ten. But then over here on the other side, they're just more of a natural fit with the SEC. You know, you got all the natural rivalries there with Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida. All those schools Clemson would fit right in. When it comes right down to it, I don't know which one it's going to be. I have a hard time seeing Clemson being left out. But I think we might be on the verge of hearing at least something about that here pretty soon, man. Maybe something about them challenging the grant of rights or something. Because something's coming. It feels like something's in the works. And I just have this feeling that the additions of Cal and Stanford and SMU kind of maybe slowed it down a little bit. Maybe wait until all the financial details are officially resolved with those additions. I do think something's coming. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but 5 years from now, I don't see Clemson still in the ACC.
All right. Well, Jason Priester, thank you so much for joining us here. Do exactly the way we end up doing it here on Broad Street South and Sports Radio 102.9. If you guys want to follow Jason on Twitter, JP_Priester. Follow him just like I follow him, Brian as well. So therefore, you guys don't miss a thing. And again, God bless you, Jason, because I know it's got to be the toughest thing in the world you end up doing. So again, my hat's off to you, sir, because for what you do, it's not the easiest thing, but we thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on, man. It kept me up here in Clemson one more night. Can never complain about that.
Thanks, Jason.
That's a great thing then. Well, Jason, thank you. I'm pretty sure we'll have you back on when the season comes back around again, because at least it'll be good to have a Clemson, insider without obviously calling you the insider.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Appreciate it, guys.
Right.
Have a good holiday,
Thank
man.
you, Jason.
Yep.
You too, man.
All right, 2 back-to-back guests here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game. It's been a while since we've been on this side of the house, for sure, and it's been a long night. That's for certain. I know Jason. There you go. I was just going to tell him if he just close out the window screen, he'll be just fine. But no, it's again, Dennis. Boy, Dennis is fiery. He was really fiery. I mean, he was. To me, it seems like he was ready to strap on a hockey helmet and some skates, and he was off and running.
Yeah, plethora of knowledge the man was. He was, talking about the teams. He was fired up. Yeah, talking about the Broad Street Bullies. He was fired up. So, yeah, anytime hockey fans are just different. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You could be talking about ice cream with hockey fans. The first time they had ice cream at a hockey game, they just get fired up. You can see the redness build, and the pressure just boiling and they just get fired up like no other fans.
They do. And that's the best part about it. I think for a lot of folks, it's like soccer. It's taken a while to build up here in America. I mean, obviously lacrosse has been big, and it starts more, obviously again on the college side. We see when it's at the link, they draw in a huge crowd at the link. Here, unlike lacrosse, volleyball ends up being big down here for obvious reasons because of weather. And then you have the tournaments coming up here this weekend. Although the weather is not going to be the best around here, starting tomorrow afternoon, we are expecting basically a monsoon to come through starting Friday night. Some pretty dangerous storms coming through on Saturday and then into Sunday. So it's going to be one heck of a 72 hours here next couple days. But Dennis there's no way, Ryan, you're going to tell me, and I know if we have more time, I did ask if he was off tonight. He said, yeah, but I know we had our second guest as well. So it'd be good to have him back on at a later time. The one thing I did say to him prior to you coming on and prior to us going live was, like the feel of LA, how's it like? And he said, well, it's good to be a New Yorker and have a New York attitude being out here in LA. One is because, it's kind of one of those things that no one's going to mess around with you, number one. But he did say things are getting a little bit better. My thing is, I would love to have gotten into him with him as far as the broadcasting aspect, because there had to be times, and God knows how many different interviews he's had. There has to be like that one that we all just want to hear, but you're never going to hear. Like on radio, they go on TV, ESPN, the NHL Network. There's certain things you are never going to hear on TV because they have to be careful of what they say. but I would love to have gotten a story from him. Yeah, and it didn't have to be anything irate or anything bad, just something that he hasn't told somewhere, just to hear like what happens behind the scenes, because we know the editing show, it's a tough game. It's grueling season. We know this. But it would have been nice to hear that one story, just to be like, give us a nugget that you wouldn't hear anywhere else.
And I'm sure every broadcaster has those kinds of stories, but you're right. They have to watch what they say on radio, on TV, but they're fans just like us. So, there have been instances over the years, and you can go on YouTube and check. They're fans just like us. They get caught up in the moment. It's just like sitting in front of your television. Something slips out. You know what I mean? So, there's all kinds of stories like that. We could ask anybody on here that's a broadcaster, on TV, on radio, even guys that are just, covering it for their website or their newspaper, how they're sitting in a booth and they jump up and they go, holy, and they just start cussing. So those are the kinds of stories that I like, because then look, even if they say it on there, I know they have the FCC regulations, but give me a break. People use those kinds of words every day in their everyday vocabulary. So I don't know why so many people get offended by cuss words that they're using regularly on a daily basis. But look, the FCC is the FCC, man.
It is. It's unfortunate, but it's as strenuous as they become in the past couple of years. I think it's worse, especially now. I mean, it's getting worse. And Sirius XM, when they first started, everybody remembers when they subscribed there, the reason why people went to Sirius XM, because they could say whatever they wanted to. And then they decided to go public, and the FCC said, oh, wait a minute. That's what you guys are doing? Guess who's here? Daddy's here. And now they stopped it. I mean, you figured even like Opie and Anthony, for those who don't know out there in New York, those guys, probably the grittiest out of every radio broadcaster combined. And then they got themselves to hot water. They were able to come back. They got picked up by another company. And then they went to Sirius XM. And even Sirius XM was like, listen, no more. Can't do it no more. That's it. It's done. And it's tough. Now with Howard, it's a whole different story. I mean, Lord knows he's had the FCC in their pockets for years. So he's probably the only one on Sirius XM that might be able to get away with a lot more than others. But that's why it's just tough. Thankfully, here on Sports Radio 102.9, don't have to worry about the FCC because they're not coming. When you're in a small market, it's great. It's when you put yourself on the radar and they're like, wait, what? Did I hear that someone else is in the scene? So, yeah, I'm just glad I have no dealings whatsoever with the FCC.
Well, this is a family show, so we try to keep it as clean as we can. So, because we don't want to get fined, we don't want to get suspended like Draymond did indefinitely. Yeah. So, yeah, we try to keep it classy as much as we can.
Yeah, just like Ron Burgundy with San Diego. Keep it classy, Ron. That's good. Such a great movie. Because, again, just put it up there. He reads everything you put up there. It's such a fantastic movie. Even, there's no way, and I'm going to, wrapping up here shortly because the hour went by quick, but there's certain movies, Ryan, you can't redo. Like, Ron Burgundy's one of those, like, the cast of characters, don't try to bring it back. Even with Christina Applegate, just leave it, leave that historical process alone. Don't bring it back. There's been rumors that they might end up bringing up, making another one. It's just there's certain classics you leave well enough alone.
They're like Footloose. They tried to remake Footloose. That was a disaster.
Sure was.
They've made a remake of Roadhouse. It's completely different than what the first movie was, from what I understand. Jake Gyllenhaal is playing the title character, and it's going to be in the octagon of MMA or mixed martial arts or whatever, so it's not going to work. Look, Footloose was a disaster at the box office way back in the day, but it has become a cult classic. It's always on television. You can't remake something like that. Just like Beverly Hills Cop with Eddie Murphy. Imagine if they tried to remake that today, forget it. People would get too butthurt. So, yeah, there's this Midnight Run, which is another comedy with Robert De Niro, Charles Grodin. You can't remake something like that. It's a timeless classic. Citizen Kane. You imagine if they try to remake Citizen Kane today or The Godfather? Forget it. It's not going to work. Leave it alone.
Yeah, because you're going to have to change the verbiage. I mean, everything's going to have to. Well, look at The Honeymooners. They try to remake The Honeymooners and end up being a box office flop.
Yep.
So there's just some things you just got to leave it the way it is. Let it be known. And if you don't like it, there was a show that I was listening to not too long ago, and they described Sanford and Son, the Jeffersons, all this stuff, All in the Family. And it was, when you heard the person saying what they were saying, it was like, oh, they were like racist, they were, homophobic, this and that. I'm like, why are you reading into what was, when we knew it was an all-time classic? Don't make it more than what it is. And I got to the point where I had to change the station. It's like, nah, you know what? I can't listen anymore. They're driving me nuts. So there's certain things you just got to leave well enough alone. Yeah,
like people think that, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I said Santa Claus, he's a bastard in that. People are too butthurt. They want to take that off the air the holiday season. Charlie Brown has like hidden meanings and messages. Right. Charlie Brown Christmas. Or The Grinch, it's too mean. Nobody acts like that. Like, come on, man. It's a cartoon. It is a cartoon. Just like Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny.
Well, Pepe Le Pew. Great point, because Pepe Le Pew, same thing. They decided no, we can't do this. He basically everything but calling him a pervert.
Well, like Dean Martin, Baby It's Cold Outside. There are radio stations that are yanking that off the air because they think it's too creepy that, the woman's saying, look, I want to leave. And the guy's saying, no, you can't. They think they're reading into it too much.
Correct.
I mean, for the Christ's sake, it's a song. It's a Christmas song. But people are just reading into it too much. But, hey, whatever. If you're a radio station that wants to pull it, that's your prerogative. But it's just a song, man.
It's exactly what it is. It's ridiculous. But again, that's what people do. They just, they keep coming up with all this stupid nonsense and whatever's. Anyways, thank you all for coming back here to Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. We do appreciate it. Also for Dennis Bernstein, Jack Priester for coming on with us. It was a quick hour. We do appreciate everyone coming back. So hopefully everyone will have yourselves a good night. As the holidays are coming around the corner. And we know this time of the year is kind of hard to reflect for a lot of folks, especially because they lose family members either around this time of the year or they've lost them sometime throughout the year. And it's a time to reflect. So if you did lose a family member, believe me, I know it's tough. We have a great friend in Fuji. He lost his mom. And it's going to be tough for him, as I told him. It's going to be really tough. It does get better. But just remember that they're always still with you no matter what. A great example is Ryan's parents went too soon, but Ryan knows they're always around him. So just keep the spirit up because it is a holiday season, but always remember the ones that we lost. So,
yep, yeah, it's tough, but a beginning always has an end. We're never prepared for the end, but when we surround ourselves with good people to get us through it, it makes it a little better.
It does. That's for sure. So take care, you guys. We do appreciate it.